So I'm going to read something which many people in the room are familiar with, written in 1967. The exploration and use of outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, shall be carried out for the benefit and in the interests of all countries, irrespective of their degree of economic or scientific development, and shall be the province of all mankind. That's the first article of the Outer Space Treaty. And so I wanted to start off actually by asking Diana and Anousheh, when you were little girls growing up in Tehran and Baghdad, did you feel space was your province? Did anyone ever give you any indication that anyone had ever said words like this?
I didn't think of space until I was 14. So definitely, I was not really looking up as much. We were kind of trying not to step on a bomb. So I was looking down more than I was looking up. But yeah, I didn't feel like I was part of space.
What happened at 14?
I came to the US. So my life really did change when we refuged to the United States. We don't really think of space often when I was a little girl, but that is changing dramatically right now, even for Iraqi little girls, because they see people like us who are part of this industry.
And I should say that Diana is very much part of this industry. You might have thought from being in this room that the only rocket that anyone in the world was interested in was Starship, but there is another rocket called New Glenn, the second stage of which is Diana's domain. So she's an engineer at Blue Origin. Anousheh, when did you? You said this. In fact, you said something about this morning, but not everyone was here. What was that moment for you?
So I was very young. I was blessed with something called ignorance. So I didn't realize, because I'm in Iran, I'm not supposed to think about space, or it's not accessible to me. So I just, science fiction, books, movies, and the beautiful night skies is what sort of gave me permission to dream about space at a very young age. And again, because I didn't know how difficult it would be to actually achieve it, I just decided that this is what I want to do. And the most important part was I didn't give up on it once I realized that it's how difficult and impossible it is. So I think it's not as we all have different experiences. So for different countries, there's sometimes cultural barriers, sometimes there are financial barriers, there are, government and other issues. But, regardless, I think night skies unite us all. It has been a uniting factor for a long time, even during the Cold War. United States and Russia still worked. Even today, we have Russian cosmonauts and American astronauts and European astronauts all working together in the space station. So I truly believe in the statement that you read.
But it does raise the question of all nations, all economies, developed and undeveloped. The excellent panel that we just heard did not seem to me to have a huge amount of promise for less developed nations or the least developed nations. As someone who thinks about this in the context of a developed nation, Portugal, Hugo, how do you feel about the obligation that all developed nations have as signatories to the Outer Space Treaty to be thinking about space for the benefit of all economies, not just their own?
Well, that's it's a tough question.
Oh, well, it's late in the afternoon. I ran out of the
Exactly, we need that, otherwise we'll be all sleeping here. It's what we can see is that when nations are working in space, it's just your daily business, right? And sometimes you just get in the wheel of that, and you don't look around and look what's happening in other places. We definitely should look into that and show how to support other nations in joining space. And what we can see is, for example, what happens in Europe. This is, of course, what we know the best with European Union or European Commission with ESA, is that the fact they have created programs that can support, not support, but working together with nations that doesn't have space programs. If we can speak about the Portuguese perspective, we joined the European Space Agency, and of course, being part of Europe, we have the benefit to already being in part of an ecosystem that exists in Europe. And so we joined ESA in the year 2000. And since the moment we joined in the year 2000, the European Space Agency allowed, especially for students, of course, for companies, but for young students in high school, but especially in university, to access educational programs that then allow them to create companies. It's, in fact, we can see that the Portuguese companies, the ones that were built or created in the very beginning, the CEOs took part of that program. And now if we think about what's happening today, and if you look to Africa and the fact that they are creating the African Space Agency, if you look to South America, they have now creating the Latin American Space Agency. These will be tools that will allow to create and develop these ecosystems. Now, we as nations that already have programs to develop in space, one of the main aspects, and I think there are two ways that we can strongly support. One is in capacity building and outreach. So reaching to universities, reaching to the young generations and make our programs or creating our programs that we have extended to them, and so bring them into our own programs. And then one key point, which is, and this is where the nations that don't have space programs, but they can actually create an impact, is on space law and space policy. And this is something that, for example, in Portugal, we are doing it already with several nations that they are developing their own space law. And since we did it very recently, right before the creation of the agency, so 6 years ago, we developed our legal framework. We are now supporting those nations that ask us for our know-how in how to build their own space law. And this will allow these nations to start and come into the wheel and start to have their own activities.
And do you have particular links between the Portuguese Space Agency and space research in the other Sinophone countries, in Brazil and Angola, Mozambique?
We are starting to have now, especially with Angola, Mozambique, and Brazil, and since we have the Portuguese-speaking countries, we are now trying to bring space into the discussions that already exist on the normal meetings that exist. Now space is becoming also a topic. One of the things that we want to do is on the educational activities that we have, for example, the Astronaut for a Day. We have the European Rocketry Challenge, which is the EROC. It's a competition for Europeans. But we are always, now we want to bring this also to the Portuguese-speaking countries, so allow for high school students to fly in a microgravity flight, like we do it here in Portugal. Also look in ways to have their participation or the possibility for them to develop rockets and come to Portugal and launch them. So at least on this side, we are trying to bring these outreach activities with them.
It's interesting, the point about language, because Anna, I know that you've thought a lot about this question of many people not having the language to talk about space.
I think that's not a common point that is usually spoken about in conferences, because we all speak English. We are obviously very interested in space. We flew all the way to Lisbon to talk about space. But for example, in Arabic, the word rocket and missile are the same. And when you're when the news headline says Iraqi female engineer working on missiles, it doesn't translate very well. And I think that exactly proves the point, is that how can you create accessibility and advocacy and connectivity to digital access to space if you don't even have the vocab for it? And I don't know if it's the same thing in Persian. Yes, there is a stereotypical idea attached to what space is, and people automatically think of defense. They don't think about space and exploration and dreaming. And it's quite unfortunate because Arabs and Iraqis specifically were the pioneers in astronomy and mathematics. And it's very different now, but I think we are taking that in reverse.
So
again.
tell us a little bit about the Arabian Stargazer.
Yeah, gladly. It is a foundation and a bilingual educational platform that I created in 2018, right after graduating. And I saw that there was a huge gap in having young students who are interested to be part of the space industry. So it's a platform where we host seminars and midnight classes because of the time difference. We host space camps. We were just in Kenya last year, and we did an initiative called Postcards to Space. And it is an initiative through Club for the Future, which is Blue Origin's nonprofit organization. And basically, it is a postcard, an actual physical postcard where you write what you think of space, what are your dreams, anything. Some people draw their flags, some people draw their family, music lyrics, and we actually take this postcard, put it on New Shepard rocket, it's also Blue Origin's rocket, and we fly it to space and we ship it back to them so they have a piece of space in their hands. And we did that with 800 students across Kenya in a village northwest of Nairobi. And it's very hard to access a village like this. We visited orphanages, hospitals, schools, and automatically through a postcard, you just created maybe the next generation of space explorers in Africa. So that's kind of the mission.
One thing that I know some people would think, possibly rather fewer in this audience than in many places, but I can imagine a line of resistance to that, saying there are things that people in villages in Kenya need much more than the experience of a postcard from space. So when you are dealing with poor countries and poor communities within poor countries, how do you square that both for them and for yourself about why is this what you're giving to them?
So you can do both at the same time. And everybody thinks that you can solve one problem that the world is facing at a time. And that's not the case. Yes, definitely space has a poetic feeling to it. We want to explore, we want to see the overview effect of Earth, but also explaining why space access is going to directly change their life. I mean, I wouldn't know they existed without internet. And having that access is going to make their life better on Earth.
Nusha, I was interested in when you were talking about what the X Prize Foundation does. Do you have any mechanism within the foundation to reach out particularly to people in developing countries to encourage those teams with some sort of, not sort of like leg up, but with sort of like more infrastructure to help them address the issues?
Yeah, I mean, we're very happy that we have participation from 174 countries,
So
but
is it 174
countries.
That's most of the countries.
So, but when you look at the distribution, it's definitely not equal, not even proportional to the population. So because we're a U.S. organization and for many years we operated in the U.S., we have majority of our participants from North America, and then the second biggest chunk is from Europe. So it is important for us, the way we found that we can really get to the right audience, because, well, through social media and internet, you can get the news out. But to get to a targeted audience, I think universities we found to be a great partners in that regard. So we established relationship with as many universities who want to partner with us. And all it means that we try to distribute information about new challenges, competition we have through them. And then we invite the researchers and scientists and experts to be part of our judging or advisory groups so they can have a hand in designing the prizes. Because a lot of the competitions we design, the solutions will impact developing nations, and some of these problems are more prominent in their countries. So not having those voices at the table is it's not going to help us really build the most impactful solution. So we do our best, and we are continuously trying to improve that. And with the budget we have in marketing, trying to get the word out as much as possible to those nations.
Ugo, that makes me think of something that you mentioned, which is that you don't have to have a space program to have an interest in space law and space policy. Is space law a particular interest of the Portuguese Space Agency? Because I know that Portugal has a glorious history in maritime law.
Yes, well, without having a proper space law, it would be difficult to be able to launch from Portugal, or also to operate satellites from Portugal. So we took this first step to make the Portuguese space law in order to allow then the country to be an active member of the space community, because even though you don't have to have it, this will put the country in a different position. Not many countries have a national space law, and so having it allows us to have this advantage, even though we don't have it yet on the technological side. At least allow, for example, other companies to come in and open their operations here in Portugal.
Diana, you've talked about a global commons.
Yeah.
Is that a legal concept for you, or is it more a sort of like spirit, just a sort of like ideal?
It's just an idea of how we can share resources and benefits across nations through partnerships and advocacy. So what I really love about XPRIZE is that even though you're not directly investing in space programs, you're actually indirectly supporting STEM education. And that STEM education kind of it teases out this talent across all of different organizations and universities. And really, we can do this with a variety of ways through collaborations with private space companies, having ride-share programs. There's for example, a lot of agencies in the past 10 years, like in Kenya or Ethiopia or Egypt, they launched their first CubeSat in this last decade, and that happened because of these partnerships. And who do you think built these CubeSats? They were younger students. And I built my first CubeSat when I was in college, and it was also in propulsion, which is where the expertise that I have right now. And it made me stick to space and stick to propulsion all these years because of real, tangible, hands-on experience that makes you actually like space and like science.
How much bigger than a CubeSat is the second stage of
It's pretty large. The stacked rocket is about 100 meters. And yes, it's very large, and we can carry humans to space in the near future, hopefully. So.
I'm interested, though, you both made the point, and I've experienced some of the wonderful dark night skies that you have on the Azores, and you've all made the point about being one of the advantages of being away from big cities is being able to see the sky. And you talked, I thought, very movingly, Anusha, about being inspired by the sky. For the coming generation, the sky is going to be defined by having lots of satellites in it in a way it's never been before. How do you imagine, given your experience, all your experience around the world, how do you imagine people are going to feel about space when space starts to actually look more artificial to them?
I don't know if it's true. I don't think the young people look at the night skies and think about satellites, because yes, there will be a lot of them, but I don't think they will be as visible as you may think, unless you know and think about it. And my experience has been when I talk to people and I show them like a satellite, because you can tell the satellite's moving, and they're like, that's a satellite?
Yeah.
So they get surprised. I think young people are motivated by the fact that space has become more accessible to them. When we launched the competition, because you only had to be the right stuff and to only go through the space agencies, and even if you made it that far, the chances of you flying once in your lifetime was slim. There was not a lot of attraction for young people to really decide to go in this direction. But now, with a variety of opportunity, where pursuing it through the government space agency is still possible, but you have all these different types of opportunity. We just talked about manufacturing drugs in space. 10 years ago, if you said that, they would think it's a pipe dream. So there's all these opportunities people in different fields of science to be involved with space, not just people who want to build rockets or who want to actually become astronauts, but really doing science in space has become a whole new field of activity because of everything we talked about this morning. And I think that's what's exciting and engaging for the young people.
And do you think that that also, there's a way in which, and I think we can to some extent thank Gene Roddenberry for this, there's a way in which science and space become fused together in this imaginary of the world without frontiers, or the final frontier. Do you think that's a powerful message in developing countries? Or do they want to see their nation into space?
I mean, I can speak from my personal experience. In a lot of the countries who don't have the possibilities, what keeps young people going is hope and inspiration. So a lot of these opportunities or science fiction stories, it's what gives them hope for a better future, and that drives them to try to make that better future possible. So I think that's the message from it. And commercial space actually has really at least started to rebalance the equation in terms of you have countries who cannot afford to have their own human space program, but can have astronauts now. And those astronauts becomes these ambassadors for math, science, STEM for the next generation in their countries. I mean, you go to Saudi, UAE, in a lot of these Malaysia, countries who had their astronauts fly commercially. Nobody says they were commercial astronauts. They look at them as this is the first, Malaysian astronaut, the first Emirati astronaut, and they have become really beacons of hope and inspiration for the next generation. So I think that's really exciting. And
I would love to comment on both of the questions in one answer. Has anybody seen a rocket launch in real life? Or like a hot fire engine? Okay, a couple of people. Did you care that who is launching this rocket, who's firing this engine, or you saw so many of them? You probably didn't, because this is how I see the future is no matter who's doing it, where they're doing it, how they did it, you'll be excited for it. I get excited every time I see a rocket launch.
And seeing them land is even cooler.
Yeah.
But this is almost by magic, one of you wonderful people on Slido, and remember you can send in questions on slido.com/space24, as if anticipating in what direction this conversation was going, is asking, and I think this must be a question for you, Hugo, when can we expect to see the first Portuguese astronaut on a space mission? What role is Portuguese space playing in making this a reality?
I was hoping for the question from before.
You can have that one afterwards, but someone here has asked this one.
Okay, I'll answer yours. I'll touch on the dark and quiet skies. Actually, this is one of the points of big discussions at UN, which is the dark and quiet skies. And there's a huge movement to bring awareness about the dark and quiet skies, the fact that we have many satellites flying, and that, for example, for astronomical observations, we need to take that into account. And it's a positive thing that, of course, we all know that Starlink is one of the main constellations that is provoking these reflecting issues. But SpaceX is also looking to ways to overcome this and reflect less light, so we don't have we diminish this problem. If I win the lottery, I would be willing to go to space and pay for a ticket.
You'll be the first astronaut.
But since that will not happen, since I don't play the lottery, I can say that.
I always think that's really unfair because, no one's likely to win the lottery, but the people who play just have these slightly better odds.
But I can say that we have already someone that went with Blue Origin to 100 kilometers high, so has been at the verge of space. It is in the pipeline that one day we'll have the Portuguese astronaut and the first Portuguese in space. We of course, we need to see also where we stand with the European Space Agency, how this evolves together with them. But it would be, of course, a main achievement to have a Portuguese astronaut, and we'll be working on that, and maybe one day, sooner than later, we'll have someone coming.
So to the person who asked, when is Hugo going to space? The answer is not terribly soon, but never say never.
Unless there's some millionaire around that wants to pay for a ticket to
I
make
think you
someone
need a
happy.
billionaire.
See us. We'll be discussing that over drinks after. But I was also interested, though, that clause about for all humankind, as we would now say, and for all nations. That's also language that you see in the Convention on the Law of the Sea and has direct implications for seabed mining in international waters. What do you think the stance should be about the international aspects of development of the moon?
Very interesting question. And we were just discussing it on the break. I think space law is fascinating because whatever you want to enforce law, you have to have a way of enforcing it. So enforcing laws in space assumes that you have control and have a way of managing, enforcement. But what if there is a possibility for independence where you will have a group who can create a settlement independent of Earth? Why would they listen to any laws that we would impose on them? So there's just multiple possibilities, but unfortunately what I see right now is a lot of large nations who are setting sight on the moon because of defense and security issues are looking how they can control resources, and whoever controls resources will control activities and growth on the moon.
So I should mention, you were mentioning science fiction. One of my absolute favorite pieces of science fiction about the moon is a novel by John Kessel called The Moon and the Other, or in French, L'une et l'autre. And it has a Persian settlement on the south pole of the moon. And one of the things that's actually rather lovely about it is it imagines that the moon is a place where people, to some extent, like North America, where people will experiment with new ways of being human, though without the problems of having to displace people who already have perfectly good ways of being human while doing it. Hugo, I think I know the answer to this, but has Portugal signed the Artemis Accords?
So no, we have not yet signed the Artemis Accords. There is also a discussion ongoing on looking to signature of the Artemis Accords. But if I might just to take on the previous one, on if Portugal has astronauts. In fact, we have 91 astronauts for one day. The Portuguese Space Agency, we launched a competition between students from high school, from 14 to 18 years old. And we make them run through a selection process with 4 different stages. And those who are selected, 30 of them, they go on a parabolic flight and they fly with astronauts and they feel microgravity. So we have started this 3 years ago. We have, actually it was the first time something similar was done around the world. And right now we have 91 students that have flown in microgravity. And what we can see now is some of them already went to university and they are pursuing their engineering careers and actually also in medicine and they want to work in space business. So we can see that this activity changed their lives. This is actually one of the aspects that they mentioned. It changed their lives. It makes also them believe in themselves because they go through quite a tough process. Just this year we had 600 applicants. And we had 30 of them that flew in microgravity. And so we can say that we have 91 astronauts by one day.
That's amazing. Woo.
Yeah. Dan, there's one we're coming short on time. We have a few questions. Yes, I am also devoted to Tintin going to the moon, but John Kessel's book is slightly richer, I think, though it has fewer men with bowler hats. But your point about STEM in non-English languages. It strikes me that that's also quite radical in that it opens up, I would imagine, STEM to less privileged people in developing countries rather than the more internationalized class. Is that something that you've seen?
This is definitely something that I do think about. Having open databases to the data that we are receiving from satellites that private companies around the world are launching would be really good starter projects for these students. So I definitely think having that accessibility in that way allows for connectivity to happen.
And the last question we have is, how can companies get involved with each of your projects? You gave a very good pitch for SpaceX for the X Prize Foundation this morning.
xprize.org, and you can Google it and go there, and you will find all different ways you can get involved.
And would I be right, Hugo, in thinking that to get involved with the Portuguese Space Agency's projects, it probably helps to be Portuguese?
Not exactly. We are open to everyone that wants to support our projects, and so we are open to discuss them.
And Diana, support for the Arabic Stargate.
Well, I would love to do a space camp in your country, wherever you are. We have a really cool curriculum, so you can just find us on thearabianstargazer.com and we can get connected.
That is a very good offer. If you are a company that wants to get involved,
Yeah.
have a space camp. And we can all spot satellites and stars and shooting stars and wish upon them as appropriate. Thank you all very much
Thank you.
indeed.
Thank
you.
you.